So, we're going to talk about reasonable domain and range for some situations. But I realized that we actually cut something out at the beginning of the year that is kind of needed for this. So, I'm going to hop back over to some technically earlier notes from the school year that we didn't do and go through these real quick. So, the real number system is talking about all the different types of numbers. Okay. And uh, kind of the main breakdown of real numbers is we have rational numbers on the left hand side and we have irrational numbers on the right hand side. Now, those irrational numbers are things like pi, which is probably like the most famous irrational number, um, and in any super ugly decimals, like it's non terminating, non repeating. Pi, obviously, very famous one of those, but it can be any of those types of decimals, particularly if you have a square root of something that's not a perfect square. That's always going to be irrational. So that's on the right hand side. And then on the left hand side, we have our rational numbers, which is essentially anything that can be written as a fraction. Um, but now the rational numbers can be broken down into other different sets. So I'm going to start at the core of the rational numbers. That red box on the inside there is the natural numbers. Those are your counting numbers, the numbers that would come to you naturally when you start learning how to count things. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and so forth, going on forever. The next number set, which notice includes all the natural numbers, is the whole numbers. And the whole numbers is kind of silly because the only extra number in there is 0. So our whole numbers are 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. Notice so far we have not encountered any negatives and we do not have any fractions or decimals. The next layer would be the integers. Okay, and notice that the whole numbers is included in the integers as well. So not only do we have our 0, 1, 2, 3, so forth, but now we have the negatives, the opposites of all of those numbers. Okay, so -1, -2, -3, and so forth. And then the grand left-hand side is the rational numbers, which I said is anything that can be written as a fraction. So already includes all those integers, because keep in mind, you can take an integer, stick it over one, poof, it's a fraction. But obviously now we have fractions, mixed numbers, and then also terminating and repeating decimals. Okay, so this is the real number system. I will post a copy of this in Classroom as well, so you have this to look back at. But now let's go to this worksheet. So the first page, you're going to listen to me talk and take some notes and write stuff down, and then you're going to try the second page on your own, and then you'll submit the notes / tried on your own paper as today's assignment. So says analyze the situation, identify a reasonable domain and range for the situation. So number 1 says the distance an airplane has traveled at any point during a flight is determined by the airplane's speed, which is 565 miles per hour. Now, when you're doing these, it's helpful to think, first of all, what are you plugging into this and what would you be getting out? Um, it does not say it. We have done questions like this where distance equals rate times time. So you would be plugging in the time and you would be getting out the distance. Okay. In this case, the rate is at 565 miles per hour. Okay. So we need to know what are some reasonable values to plug in for this t. Okay. And they give us a lot of options. So we're going to have to kind of narrow this down a little bit. So our t is what we're plugging in. I think the first thing we should know is we can't have negative time. I think that's probably the easiest one to do first. So that actually gets rid of all real numbers. So we have all real numbers right here. Okay. We can also get rid of all integers because integers will also include the negatives. I think that's the only thing we can eliminate that like that, because some of the other ones say all real numbers, but like this one says from 0 to integers from 0 to. So all these other ones are already saying 0 or more, okay? And then all whole numbers obviously is 0, 1, 2, and so forth. So these two, I'm just gonna make a note, I'm going to get rid of because we don't want any negatives, okay? The second thing we should note is when we have time, time is something that you can have a fraction of, okay? Especially here when we're talking about, hours, okay? Our time is in hours. You can talk about a half hour or even 12 minutes, okay? You can find a distance for 12 minutes. So we don't want to choose an answer where it's only going to be integers or, those nice numbers. We want something that's going to give us, those not so great numbers in between. Okay, so I'm looking at the first one, says all real numbers. That could be it because real numbers includes everything. The next one says integers. So I'm going to say let's cross that off because when we say integers, that means no fractions. The next one also, at least the next one we have, we already crossed the next one off, but all integers, so we're going to get rid of that. Next one, all real numbers greater than or equal to 0. Okay, that's okay so far. That's taking care of some fractions. All real numbers from 0 to 565 times the that's okay so far. And all whole numbers also we can get rid of because all whole numbers are just be 0, 1, 2, no fractions. Okay, so I'm going to say first thing we took care of was getting rid of things that involved negative numbers. Now we're getting rid of the things that don't have fractions. Okay, because I'm going to say it can be a fraction. Okay, so we're left with 3 answer choices, so that's not so bad. So let's look at these. We have all real numbers from 0 to the duration of the flight in hours. That seems to be making sense to me. If we're talking about time of this flight, the time can be 0. Okay, the airplane hasn't taken off yet. Or the maximum amount, I believe, would be, how long the flight is. So that first option is looking pretty good to me. The next one down, all real numbers greater than or equal to 0. Uh, that one, we need some limit, I think. Our flight is not going to be this indefinite flight. At some point, even it would have to stop and refuel. So we can't just have an unlimited number of real numbers. So that's going to say this one is not good. And then all real numbers from 0 to 565 times the duration of the flight. We don't need that 565 if we're just talking about the possible things we can plug in for t. So that one is not making sense to me. So it appears that our domain is all real numbers from 0 to the duration of the flight in hours. Okay, all the possible time values that can be plugged in. For the range is what we're getting out. Range is distance that the plane has traveled so far. So let's see. We have same thing. We can get rid of, we can kind of go through and eliminate things, but let's really think about what's happening here. To get our distance, we're taking this time that we already said is going to be all real numbers from 0 to the duration of the flight, and we're multiplying it by 565. So if you scroll through these answer choices, it should all look pretty similar. I think it's mostly the same answers, just in a different order. I remember one where we were talking about that 565, and I believe that looks like a good answer. So we have all real numbers from 0 to 565 times the duration of the flight in hours. Because if you plug in 0, you're still doing 565 times 0, but that's just 0. But then the next one would be 565 times whatever t is. And the maximum amount would be 565 times that maximum t value. So the range is all real numbers from 0 to 565 times the duration of the flight. Okay. I hope that made some sense. It was kind of a tricky one to start out with. But you're just saying, like, what are the possible types of numbers that we can plug in for these values? Okay, number 2, same type of situation. We're finding a reasonable domain and range. The revenue earned, so the money that they're earning, from a sporting event can be determined by the ticket price, which is $125 each. So if you're thinking this through, okay, I think in this situation we'd be plugging in the number of tickets. So I'm going to say in is number of tickets. And then they said what you're getting out is that revenue, the money earned. Okay, if you don't like revenue, you can just write money earned. So what are some possible values for number of tickets? Okay, so same thing. We're going to say, okay, can we have negatives? That's a good one to start with. Can we have fractions? Okay, is there a minimum maximum type of thing? So let's kind of go in the same order. Can we have negatives here? If input is number of tickets, can't sell a negative number of tickets. So I'm going to say no negatives. Okay. Um, and let's get rid of our options that have negative numbers. So all whole numbers, that's fine. That's 0 and above. All integers. Integers applies the positive and the negative whole numbers. So let's get rid of integers. All real numbers greater than or equal to 0. So that is implying it's positive. All whole numbers is positive. All real numbers from 0 to 125 would be positive. Okay. And all real numbers, that's too broad because that can be negative numbers in there. So get rid of that one. And then all integers from 0 to, so those are only positives. That's okay. What's next? We did negatives. So number, are fractions possible? So if we're plugging in number of tickets, unlike time, you cannot have a fraction of a ticket. So this is one where we can't have negatives, but we also can't have fractions. Okay, so let's go through all whole number multiples. That's okay so far. All real numbers. Real numbers is everything pretty much. Rational, irrational, includes fractions, so it can't be all real numbers. Whole numbers, still okay. That'd be 0, 1, 2, so forth. Next one's all real numbers. No, because that'd be fractions. And the last one is all integers, so that one seems okay. Okay. And then we have 3 options left. Let's see. All whole number multiples of 125. That's we wouldn't be plugging in multiples of 125. That doesn't make sense. We're taking the input and multiplying it by 125, but we're not plugging in multiples of 125. I'm thinking all whole numbers is probably a good option. That looks good. That'd be 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth to infinity. And then the last one says all integers from 0 to 125. Well, the 125 is the ticket price. That's not going to be the maximum amount of tickets. They don't give us a max. Okay, that's saying that that's the max number. So we don't want this one. So our inputs here would be all whole numbers. Okay, and the last one here, the range. Now thinking it through, we would take the number of tickets and we would multiply it by $125 each. So we're taking all the whole numbers and multiplying it by 125, sorry. That first answer looks good to me. If you're taking all the input, all the whole numbers and multiplying it by 125, that means the outputs, the range is just going to be all the whole number multiples of 125. Okay. If you wrote it out, it'd be 0, 125, 250, etc. Okay. And number 3, we're just focusing on the domain on this one. Cameron earns an hourly wage at his job. He makes a table of the number of hours he works each week and the amount of money he earns. So let's see if go through our things. We need non-negative numbers. Once again, talk about number of hours. So do any of these options talk about negative numbers? Let's see. Greater than or equal to 0, that's positive. They all appear, I think they all say something with greater than or equal to 0. And then this one says non-negative, so that's not helping us. Let's see. I guess the other thing is, can it be I'm trying to think. I was trying to go similar to what we did before. Um, but I think in this case, I was thinking it could be fractions, but just looking at the answer choices, I'm thinking they're saying it's just hours of work. So like he's only working a like a nice number of hours. Because the only one really that has anything is this choice D, which says real numbers with at most two decimal places that are also greater than or equal to 0. I don't really know what this two decimal places has anything to do with it. It's kind of an odd answer. Um, so pretty much everything else is going to be integers. So let's not worry about any fractions. So let's just go through these. Integers greater than or equal to 0, greater than or equal to 0, less than 40, greater than or equal to 0, less than or equal to 168, the number of hours in a week, and non-negative multiples of Cameron's hourly wage. So that to me jumps out. When you see that multiples, okay, that's often what's going on with the range. So if we're talking about range, that would be probably a good answer there. Because you're taking this input and multiplying it by some number. So it's not going to be E. So A, B, and C very similar, but one is just, above 0, one is 0 to 40, and one is 0 to 168. Now, an argument, in my opinion, could probably be made for two of these answers. However, just based on the question itself, I would say that you can't work more than 24 hours in one day for 7 days in the week. So I'm thinking that 168, which is 7 times 24, that's going to be the maximum amount. So I'm going to say, because they don't really give us tons of information in the question, our maximum input is going to be 168. Now, obviously, you can sit there and make an argument and say, well, no one in the world can work for 168 hours straight. So that's not a realistic domain. But to me, the next one would be the maximum of 40. And nowhere in here does it say he only works 40 hours at his job. 40 hours is, the typical, like a 40-hour work week, but it doesn't say he only works 40 hours. So I don't know if we can just use that 40 because it doesn't tell us that. So I'd say just based on how time and life work, 168 is going to be our maximum. But like I said, if you argued for B, you could probably make a good point. A can't work though, definitely, because we need some limit, because 168 is the maximum amount of hours in a week. So definitely can't be A, but B or C, could possibly be okay. I know I feel like I just rambled a lot. I hope that made some semblance of sense. If you have any questions, please make sure you're writing them down so we can talk about them next week. And so you have a couple extra questions on the other side of your page, very similar to the ones we just did. Well, I guess 4 and 5 are very similar. Number 6 is just slightly different. It's just talking about keeping something a function. So try 4, 5, and 6. And like I said, you're going to submit these as your assignment. I'm not grading you based on the correctness of your answers, just if you are, copying down the notes and then giving these last 3 questions your best shot. Okay, that is it.